For most of us, home is it. It's the one place in the entire world where we can just drop our guard. It's our safe space, our sanctuary. The one place where the locks are on our side of the door. But what happens when that feeling is completely shattered? What happens when the horror you're trying to lock out is already inside with you?
That quote, it's from someone whose safe space was violated in a way you just can't fathom. And it really gets to the core of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to dive into 3 true stories where that illusion of a safe home was just completely and utterly dismantled. So, here's the plan. We're going to look at 3 different case studies, and each one pulls back a different layer of what we think makes our home secure. We'll see how threats can pop up from right next door, from the shadows just outside your window, or even from inside the very walls of your house. Okay, so our first story kicks off with something a lot of us can relate to, right? New neighbors are moving in. This case is all about an external danger, but the scary part is how normal it all seemed at first, hiding this whole criminal underworld just a few feet away.
So, the person telling the story sells their old house to what seems like a totally pleasant Polish couple. They have some small talk, the sale goes through, everything seems fine. But that feeling doesn't last long. It quickly goes from normal to, well, sinister. We're talking bizarre disturbances, loud banging in the middle of the night, music blasting so loud it shakes the walls. It was the calm before a major storm.
And man, things just spiral out of control and fast. So you have the weird disturbances. Then there's a supposed break-in that the narrator was pretty sure was just staged. All of this builds to this insane, almost movie-like heist where these guys literally crash a car through the front garden to rob the house. And just when you think it's all over, the real neighbor shows up again. The actual neighbor, the husband, reappears, but he's just unrecognizable. He's been brutally beaten, looks almost feral, just completely broken. And when the police try to help him, he completely refuses to cooperate. He won't even file a report. It's so clear he's part of some other world, a world where talking to the cops only makes everything way, way worse.
But the night's not done. After he refuses medical help and the police drop him at a hospital, he comes back at 1 a.m. The narrator watches on their doorbell camera as this broken, bloodied man hides behind their cars and their driveway. The whole thing ends with this dramatic, sobbing fight between him and his wife right there in the street before they just vanish. That line between their violent world and the narrator's quiet suburban life, it's been totally erased.
All right, let's shift gears to our second case. Here, the threat is also coming from outside, but this time, it's a complete unknown. This story isn't about some violent crime spree. It's about the slow burn psychological horror of being watched, and, even worse, of no one believing you.
For years, the teenage narrator of the story was a victim of exactly this. She'd hear things right outside her ground floor bedroom window, footsteps, shuffling. Sometimes she could even hear breathing. But every single time she brought it up, she was told, "Oh, it's just your imagination," or "You've been watching too many scary movies." She was literally being made to question her own reality.
This right here really shows you the battle she was fighting in her own head. On one side, you have the terrifying things she's actually hearing and seeing. On the other, you have her family just constantly explaining it away. She even saw a silhouette reflected in her closet mirror once, but was told, "Don't be silly, we live in a safe neighborhood." So for years, she was just trapped between what she knew was real and what her family told her was real. And then you get the moment of absolute terrifying validation. One night, there's a big windstorm, and her dad goes out into the backyard. And there, lit up by the light coming from her bedroom, he sees him, a man, just standing there, motionless, staring right into her room. After years and years of being doubted, her absolute worst fear was real, and he had been there the whole time. Okay, so our final case. This one, for my money, is maybe the most terrifying violation possible, because the threat isn't next door, and it's not outside the window. It's an internal threat. Someone living inside the house without anyone knowing. The horror in this story, it builds. It's a series of these really unsettling clues. It starts with stuff you might try to explain away. The front door is open, maybe someone forgot to lock it. Books are knocked over, maybe the cat did it. But then it gets impossible to ignore, a clear laugh coming from inside a wall. And then the absolute bone-chilling discovery of heavy footsteps on the baby monitor, followed by a faint shush sound when nobody else is supposed to be home. The police came and searched the house multiple times, and they found nothing. But the father just couldn't shake this awful feeling. He asked them to check one last place, behind the big bookshelf in his daughter's basement bedroom. And that's when they found it. The bookshelf wasn't a bookshelf at all. It was a door. Inside that secret room, they find undeniable proof someone had been there. Food wrappers, a cup that had vanished from their kitchen, a switchblade, and the most horrifying thing of all, a half-eaten apple that was still fresh. This meant someone had been in there very, very recently. Someone had been living inside their home. But somehow, the worst was yet to come. A few days later, the narrator is exploring that secret room herself, and she finds a tiny little hole drilled into the wall, a peephole. She looks through it, and it's aimed directly at her bed. The intruder wasn't just living in her house, they had been watching her, every move.
You know, in all three of these stories, the person responsible was never caught. And that's really where the true horror settles in the aftermath, in all those lingering questions and the permanent destruction of the one place on Earth you're supposed to feel safe.
When you look at them side by side, you see each story leaves its own kind of permanent scar. For that first narrator, it's the sudden, jarring realization that a violent world can be hiding just behind your neighbor's front door. For the second, it's a permanent fear of the dark, of that unknown watcher. And for the third, her sanctuary, her own bedroom, became the source of her terror. There's just no coming back from that.
And you're just left with these questions that will never, ever be answered. Like with the watcher. Remember that neighbor who threatened to call the cops when the family warned her? What was her deal? Was she protecting him? Did she know he was out there all along?
And this is the question that must keep that narrator up at night. After years of just watching, was that his endgame? Or was he building up the courage to do something much, much worse? We'll just never know. This final thought from our third narrator, it just perfectly sums up the absolute violation. It wasn't just that her physical space was invaded. It was her entire life. Every private moment, every little mundane thing she did was being secretly watched. And that kind of forces all of us to think about something really uncomfortable. I mean, these stories feel so extreme, but they're a stark reminder that our whole sense of security is really just built on trust and circumstance. It really makes you wonder, after hearing all that, how safe do you feel in your own sanctuary?